Coach Lee Hopkins. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I want to welcome you to the Engaged Employee Podcast. Our mission is to emphasize the relationship between the employee and the workplace with the goal of enhancing engagement levels to create a more productive and satisfying work environment. While many organizations strive to create a more engaging atmosphere, they often miss the mark by forcing connection with big team building events like axe throwing or escape rooms. Those activities only leave employees with a short-lived sense of belonging. Organizations may also try smaller and more suffocating events like happy hours or group birthday celebrations that their employees feel obligated to attend. As a social connections and business culture coach, I found that to create a stable, engaged, and productive workforce, there needs to be a shift in focus from mandatory fun and manufactured connection towards building trust and authentic conversation. Join me and a guest as we dive into social wellness strategies for the individual employee, techniques for developing interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and even some approaches for leaders to enrich the overall organizational culture. The Engaged Employee Podcast starts now. Welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast. My name is Coach Lee, and my guest today is Simone Sloan. As the founder and CEO of Your Choice Coach, Simone is an accomplished business strategist, executive coach, and DEI consultant. She has held several senior roles at Fortune 500 companies across marketing, communications, medical affairs, sales, global business strategies, and more. Her tenure includes successfully launching and leading products and services, implementing programs for key stakeholders across the globe, and developing training and sales, medical, and technical teams. Simone's mantra is voice, power, confidence. As an emotional intelligence executive coach, she changes the way leaders and their businesses engage their employees and clients. Simone emphasizes the human element with a focus on diversity and inclusion. Simone is a keynote speaker and has been featured as a thought leader in articles like Huffington Post, Forbes, and Pharmacy Times. She's an active member of Tri-State Diversity Council, an advocate for women, LGBTQI, BIPOC, people with disabilities, and cross generations. Simone also holds a BS in pharmacy and an MA from Howard University. She is a co-author of many books, including Achieve Results, 30 Days to Courage, Leadership Without Borders, and is a certified DISC Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Cultural Competence, Cultural Intelligence, Culture Values, Blockchain, Behavior Design, and also accredited with the International Coaching Federation. I wanted to say that all very, very quickly. It sounded so good in my head, but there's so much here. I'm just going to bring Simone on so we can get right into this stuff. Because what did I just say? What I'm going to say right now. Welcome, Simone.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
So you aren't busy and you don't do much.
Not at all.
When I read your profile, I really enjoyed learning from you. I mean, it's possible, you're capable of doing all kinds of amazing things across many different cultures and competencies, DEI, BIPOC, LGBTQ, and cross-generational is the one that really grabbed my attention. There's so many things. We can talk about so many things. But right now, I'd like to know, and my audience would like to know, how did you get into this kind of EQ coaching? Because all of this encompasses the EQ thing. What's your origin story?
Absolutely. Well, I'll say that my background is from the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a pharmacist by trade. So it's all STEM and very analytical, right? And so, I've also ran my own teams. And I think one of the things that really stuck out to me is when one of my teams said to me, they don't really know me. And I've been there at the organization for quite some time. And I could have gotten all heady with it and said, well, here are my credentials and blah, 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 my pedigree. But I said, you know what? Let me just step back a bit and see what they're really trying to ask. And when I kind of reflected on it, it came down to how do we connect to you? And so what I did was in the next meeting, rather than talking about the numbers and what I've done and all my accomplishments, I talked about me and shared a little bit about my background and who I was as a human being. And the feedback I got from that was just like amazing, right? And so I said, there's something here. So then I started doing that with the team in terms of once a month, giving them a spotlight where they can share not what they do, but who they are. And I saw the energy shifting as we were doing that and engaging each other in a different way. Fast forward, I'm looking, from that perspective, I said, well, what's my next act? What do I want to do? How can I have a different impact? And so that's where I said coaching found me and dove into that from a 12-month certification process that then went into the study of being, right? And that's something in corporate America we don't get to experience.
Not at all.
And so from that perspective, I said, this is something I needed to embrace. Initially, I was rejecting it and resisting. And I said, if I'm resisting, it's because I need to be here. And so I really thought about that, and making me feel uncomfortable was also a way for me to experience something different. And I decided to sit with that discomfort. And after going through this program, it was one of the most refreshing, invigorating things that I've learned about myself, and then wanted to also share across the corporate world. And so that's where I kind of started from that perspective. And it dove into emotional intelligence, the cultural competencies, all the different layers of the three-dimensional pieces of who we are as a human being.
Wow, that is really inspiring to be in this place where, someone has essentially challenged you and having this emotional intelligence to feel like, oh, it's not anything personal. It's something for me to discover. And you discovered more about yourself and you shared, and it was just really, really connecting. I live for that. I love that because my story, it feels like that too. Essentially, I don't really know people and people don't really know me. How can we bridge that
Yeah.
gap?
Yep.
And what I find though, and what you found, I'm sure, is it's challenging to do it in the workplace rather than outside of the workplace because we're supposed to wear a mask or have
Yes.
some kind of persona that is meant for us to be more effective at the productivity and so forth. So we've been told. So we've been told. So I wonder, how do you help clients with this EQ? How does it help their organizations?
Oh my goodness. Where it really works, I think, in terms of, I talk about working with the toxic rock stars. And with that, they come in all shapes, colors, and versions, right? But the key thing around this is that they're working in a bubble. They're the ones that are really great at what they do, but they're also killing people, right, in that process and how they work. And so with that comes a lot of that self-awareness for them to really understand who they are, but also the impact they're having on their teams, because no one's giving them that constructive feedback. No one's giving them or allowing them to hear the feedback of what others are saying and feeling in those moments. And so really what we do around that is supporting them with the emotional intelligence through an assessment, as well as even through constructive feedback where they hear and get feedback from folks who have worked with them, known them for quite some time, to enable them to understand how they view themselves, but how are others experiencing them, and how are they building community teams and their tribes and connections in that moment. And it even spreads down to in terms of their flexibility in terms of working with others, right? Having that I say so and this is the way it goes versus bringing people in as part of that process and getting that buy-in and intentionality in decision making. So those are some of the ways through which we pick it apart, but also put it together to allow them to see where we can optimize who they are as a human being so they can get the trust, connection, and build collaboration as part of their 360.
Trust, connection, and collaboration. I like that. We work with people that we work best with people that we know, like, and trust. And that the connection is real key to it. And having been the toxic person myself I've been the toxic person, really completely unaware of how I was impacting other people, but also pretty good at what I did. I'd be curious to know, how do you get through, or what are some of those challenges that might occur when you're trying to get through to some of these people who are just like, you know what? I bring in the numbers. The numbers speak for me. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm a rock star here. How can you tell them, or how can you help them understand that they're impacting the company in a not desirable way?
Absolutely. I think one of the key things with that comes to play is, you reach a certain point where you can be only so good at the technical. Because when you start managing and working across functions, across people, managing your own people, it comes down to that interpersonal skills and connection. And if you're not able to build that, practice that, be aware of that, that's where you may falter. Because while you may think that, yes, you're hitting those numbers, but how many people want to be on your team or and raise their hand and say, yes, I'd love to work with you again, right? And sometimes you kind of wonder, they get the angst and anxiety when they know that, oh my gosh, I have to interact with this person who is potentially toxic, right? From that perspective. We all want to be with winners, but also we want to be respected. We want to be welcomed, valued, and heard. And when those piece fundamentals are being missed by leaders, by managers, by your colleagues, it leaves like this lackluster feel in terms of how you want to be perceived and to work well. Some things that we work with around that is, first of all, the challenges, right? You mentioned some of those things, is trust the process. Sometimes they feel like, you know what, I'm doing this, I've been taught X, Y's, and Z's, I've never had a problem before. The rubber hits the road in terms of when you want that promotion and what's needed to get the organization to the next level. And do you have the skills, not only galvanize yourself, but a whole team around your ideas and strategies? And so that's the first thing around the awareness.
Yes, because those all those things are important. As awesome as we are, or the rock star, the toxic rock stars you are, you're bringing the numbers, but if people don't want to work with you, it ultimately affects the productivity of the rest of the company. And you are not the sole force of the company. You're not bringing in all of the money. We need other people to work with you. We need other people to get along. And if you're a problem, if you can't motivate people to want to work with you, it is just very, very problematic for the company overall. And eventually they're going to notice, and that technical piece that you can do is not going to be as valuable. It's not going to be as valuable. So
Absolutely.
that's all the stuff that I've heard you say. I'd be curious to know, because I also know that you have a book called The Soul Professional. You're also writing as a part of this, and you have a chapter called Putting Humanity Back into Your Organization. How do you suppose we do that?
Yeah. I talk about three things in the book really to help to get companies around how do we start being intentional in nurturing the culture, right? Because it's kind of like a plant. If you leave it alone, it's going to, and not water it and not feed it, it dies. And so it really becomes how to become more intentional as people managers to continue to nurture that culture. And I talk about the trust, connection, collaboration aspects of how to build that trust, how to look at the collaborations and really connect authentically. Because at the end of the day, especially in the way in which we're working now, community becomes ever more important, right? And I was reading the Wall Street Journal just a couple of weeks ago too, just in terms of the need to finding best friends at work and finding those connections, the things that motivate you and want to keep you engaged in the process. And so finding those creative elements that allows us to do that are some of the essential things that I talk about in the chapter.
That's fantastic. Best friend at work, I'm all for that. I'd like to be able to talk to someone about how I'm feeling about my day at work who can relate to it, because the people outside of work don't know what Karen is doing, or how annoying Jerry is, or whatever is going on, whatever's frustrating at work, or whatever's happy and exciting at work. I'd love to be able to share it with somebody who really understands me, so that finding that humanity at work. So, with that said, I know that you gave a great example at the beginning of this in your origin story. You talked about, as you were a people leader, you were open to creating an environment in which your team could tell more about themselves. But if I were an organization, what would you recommend I do? If I'm the head of the organization or a leader of people, how can I get that connection started? What's one thing that I could do?
Sure. I always say to lead with values, right? And not just some things that you put on a website and they just become words, but looking at it from three elements. One is the value, not only I would say in terms of the principles, right? Your beliefs. Of what is it that you believe? Two then goes into the behaviors. What is it that you want to see people start actioning as part of this, right? And three are the values, that foundational elements that help make decisions. And all of those things combined is culture. right? The approach and way in which we get things done. And if you look at that from a day-to-day perspective, is there trust? Is there respect? Is there inclusion, right? Collaboration, clear communication, psychological safety to speak up and say something, even when it doesn't feel comfortable. These are all elements of things that you want to instill as part of your organization, and foundational elements of how people should connect and work.
I love that. The analysis of what it is that you'd like to create. What kind of organization do you want your company, or do you want your employees to work for? How do you want them to feel in your presence? Taking some time to reflect on that and learning about what you want in order to build a roadmap to make sure it happens. It's the best step. The planning, I think, is just really
Yeah.
important to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want people to understand, what is the environment that will allow them to thrive, to have
Mhm.
a good employee experience, to want to be I call them your advocates when they're not in the four corners or four walls or four screens, right, of the organization. Because at the end of the day, that's the longevity of the organization, what people say when they're outside about you, and who they bring in or don't as part of that culture.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Well, Simone, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. The last question I have for you is can you tell people where they can find you?
Oh, absolutely. You can reach me at yourchoicecoach.com, YOURCHOICE, coach.com. LinkedIn at Simone Sloan. I'd love to connect with you there. I'm also on Facebook, Your Business Greatness, and Instagram, Simone_Sloan_.
Underscores that somebody had your name first. That's why you couldn't just put it
Exactly.
together. Oh,
But I'm a
wow.
unicorn. What do you mean?
You Oh, you are special. Thank you so much for all of your time and
Oh,
talents and this great information that you shared with us.
oh, thank you for having me.
All right, take care. Another insightful episode of the Engaged Employee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of employee engagement, leadership, and workplace dynamics. The Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Before we wrap up, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guests and, of course, our loyal listeners. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you valuable content each week. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking and want to learn more about how we can help you or your organization make more meaningful relationships, go to patternsofpossibility.com and book a friendly conversation with me. Or you can email me your questions at patternsofpossibility@gmail.com. Stay connected with us and engage with fellow listeners by following the Patterns of Possibility on LinkedIn. You can also catch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop. And if you prefer the audio version, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us, and by subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you for being a part of our journey to create workplaces where passion meets productivity. Until next time, I'm Coach Lee. Stay engaged, stay inspired.